So I was in the co-op during the week, and standing at the till, there was a man in front of me, and then I suddenly saw this sign, and it said, "Observe social distancing." And I thought, oh my goodness, that's right. Amazing the things that you kind of forget about. And so I took a few steps back, waited my turn. There should have been signs like that around 10 Downing Street. We got to see a clip of a Prime Minister and a Health Secretary and the Chief Medical Officer of England all walking down a stairway after a meeting together in close proximity. Is it really a surprise that the three of them have now tested positive for the virus? And in America, the president signing the $2 trillion deal to combat the virus, and to get his photo op, he's got 16 members of the Republican Party standing shoulder to shoulder behind him, and the Twitter feed just went wild with people saying social distancing, because none of them were observing it, and yet they were the ones to give the advice to everyone else in the country. So that's what signs are meant to do. That you're meant to see a sign and then react to it, act upon it. If you don't do that, then it's been a waste of somebody's time making the sign. John's Gospel is built on a series of signs. Other stories we call miracles. John never calls any of these miracles. He calls them all signs, from turning the water into wine at Cana to the one that we are looking at today, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. This is a sign. Imagine that you had been able to watch Blondell and he's crossing on a tightrope over Niagara Falls, or the guy that did it between the two Twin Towers after they had been built. Perhaps you've seen recently the man that's invented his own sort of powered wings, and he just flies around like Superman above sea and towns and cities. What's the reaction when you see that? You would go, wow! But then that would be the end of it, because it has nothing to do with our own selves. A sign is different. You're meant to see a sign and then act upon it. So if today you read the story simply is, oh, Jesus raised a man from the dead. He'd been dead for 4 days and yet Jesus brought him back to life. Wow! Then we've missed the point, because the story is a sign. And I want today to talk about this story, but to do it backwards. I want to start at the end. Have you ever been to movies and the trailers come on? Or you've maybe seen a trailer for something on TV, and you're brought into wanting to see the movie because you've watched the trailer. But when you watch the movie, imagine your shock, as it's happened to me a couple of times, when you realise that the last scene, the big climax, has been in the trailer. You've already seen it. And, well, in a sense, this is what happens in John's Gospel about this particular sign. It's been trailed. If you go back and read John chapter 5, you'll see a story about the man at the side of the pool who Jesus eventually heals. And then after that, there's one of John's favourites, let's have a long dialogue going on with Jesus talking. And in that, Jesus basically previews this story. The day is coming, he says, when those who are in their graves will hear the voice of the Son of Man, and they will come out of them alive. He trailed the story that is about to happen in his gospel. And I think he did that because this is what everything has been leading up to. This is the point of what Jesus has come into the world to do. Do you remember the story of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities? And near the beginning, one of the characters receives a message about someone who's been held in a prison in France. And he gives another man a message. He says, tell them, recall to life. Recall to life. That's the point of this story at one level. It's about a sign that we are all capable of being recalled to life from whatever situation of death or imprisonment that is like death that we have been in. This is what makes it a sign. This is the power that Jesus has. He can recall to life anyone, anything that is going on. That's his power. It doesn't matter what that situation is, no matter how bad it is, Jesus can recall us to life. That's the sign. Now I want you to take a step back to the second part of the story that we heard earlier in the service, where Jesus meets with Mary. And at this point, there's a lot of tears. Mary is weeping. The Jews who have come to console the family are weeping. Eventually, it will tell us that Jesus wept. All of this weeping, what is it about? Why does Jesus weep? Because in the story, we discover that his weeping is not the same as the others. And his weeping is because he is internally being deeply affected by the fact of what he is about to do. John's Gospel is very different from the other three in that he has taken a story from the end of Jesus' life and he shoved it right to the beginning, the story of the cleansing of the temple. In the other three Gospels, that story is what sets up the events that will take place in Holy Week, where the authorities seek the death of Jesus. Because he's moved that story right forward, this story about Lazarus plays the same role. In this story, what Jesus is about to do will bring about his downfall, and he knows it. He knew it before he came to Bethany. Here is the story that's also missing from John, but is in the other three Gospels, and that is Gethsemane. At Gethsemane, Jesus is at his most vulnerable. His humanity, the vulnerability of his humanity, the frailty of his will is exposed. His desire not to have to do this, not to have to die, and yet holding on to his desire also to be obedient to God. Well, here's John's Gethsemane. It happens in this moment because what you find is that Jesus is seeing people who are weeping over the dead, when in fact he is the one who is the source of life, life that can recall from the dead, and yet they are not focused on that fact. And Jesus knows the cost of him to himself, of what it will mean to become the person who can do that in the world, who can recall to life. You see, there is a cost. Think about this. The moment of death is an instant away from life. But once you're in death, what is it that actually makes it possible for that recall to life to happen? We don't really ever give that a thought, but the gospel declares it's there in the cross of Christ, in the agonizing death that Jesus undergoes. We are being told this is how God has filled the void, crossed the chasm that separates death from life after death. And that cost Jesus was willing to bear for us so that we might be able to know being recalled to life, in life, and also after death. That cross was what made this possible. And then go back to the first part of the reading, where Jesus is greeted by Martha, who declares that she knows that if Jesus had been there, Lazarus wouldn't have died. And so to her, Jesus has to say, your brother will rise again. And in saying that, she then says, yes, I know my brother will rise on the last day. In other words, she has the kind of Jewish belief in resurrection, but resurrection that happens way into the future some point in time. And Jesus therefore has to say, no, look, I am the resurrection and the life. I have the capacity to recall to life those who have died. And those who are living and will continue to believe in me, well, they'll never die because I will hold on to them at all times and can recall them to life. And she looks at him as he asks her this one question: do you believe this? She then says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. In other words, she is expressing her belief in the person and what that person will be able to accomplish. But she does not know what he is going to have to do to accomplish it through the cross. That's still to come. And so today, this sign is there for us as we are facing this coronavirus together as a nation. The sign is there for us. Recall to life. And we have to recognize just what was being done to make that sign possible in the person of Jesus. The cost he bore. But do we believe this? Do we believe the sign and therefore are ready to act upon it? And by acting upon it, it means to look and see what's happening and see the evidence in what's happening of Jesus, the Christ, the Spirit of God at work in the world. And so, did you see it? Did you see it on Thursday night when so many people, isolated in their homes, took the time to applaud the people of the NHS? Do you think that's just us, that we've got some inner capacity? Do you not realise that this is a sign of the God at work in and through us? They asked for volunteers to support the NHS. When I saw the number 250,000, I thought, wow, and yet over 500,000 willing to do so. Again, do you think we in our human nature just have these capacities in such reserve? Or are we seeing the sign of the one who is the resurrection and the life? Small children are being asked to paint rainbows or draw rainbows and put them in the window, a sign of their optimism for the future. Do we see the sign of the person who has enabled the societies of the world to be recalled to life? This is our hope in this time. Our hope is in the one who said, I am the resurrection and the life.